The wind howled through the trees as Jake stepped onto his back porch, rubbing his hands together for warmth. The air carried the sharp bite of an approaching storm, but he welcomed it. Nothing was better than a crackling fire on a night like this. He descended the steps, boots crunching against the frostbitten grass, and made his way to the firewood stack beside the shed. He reached down, fingers closing around empty air. His stomach tensed. Jake straightened, scanning the pile, his breath curling in the cold air. The stack was half its usual size. He blinked, rubbing his eyes as if exhaustion was playing tricks on him, but the evidence was right there. Logs missing, a jagged gap in the neatly arranged wood. A spike of irritation shot through him. Had someone taken it? No, stolen it. His eyes narrowed as his mind worked through the possibilities. The neighborhood was safe, the kind of place where people waved from their porches and swapped Christmas cookies. But beneath that friendly exterior lay the iron grip of the homeowners association, led by none other than Karen. Karen. Jake exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. It had to be her. He wasn't sure how, but if there was one person in the world who could steal from him with a straight face and call it a community effort, it was her. She ruled the HOA like a dictator in yoga pants, her emails dripping with passive-aggressive authority. No porch light too bright, no lawn too unkempt, no holiday decoration too cheerful to escape her wrath. Jake's previous run-ins with Karen had been nothing short of infuriating. There was the time she fined him for having his garbage cans visible from the street. Another when she threatened action over his unsanctioned garden gnome. He'd laughed at first, but then the fines started piling up, and it was clear she wasn't joking. Clenching his jaw, he turned back toward the house, only to spot a neatly folded note taped to his front door. He ripped it off, already knowing who it was from. Dear Resident. The words sat on the page, clinical and smug. Asterisk, in the interest of preserving communal resources, the HOA has requisitioned firewood from select homes to ensure equitable distribution during the upcoming cold front. Thank you for your contribution to our neighborhood's well-being. Please remember that a warm home is a privilege best shared. Complaints may be directed to the HOA office during business hours. Asterisk. Jake read the note twice, feeling his blood pressure rise. Equitable distribution? Shared privilege? His firewood hadn't been requisitioned. It had been stolen. And he already knew exactly where it had gone. He stormed down the sidewalk, fists clenched at his sides. Karen's house sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, its manicured lawn standing in sharp contrast to the winter-barren branches that framed it. Warm, golden light poured from the windows, casting long shadows on the pavement. When he reached the front door, he didn't bother knocking, he pounded. There was a shuffle inside, the kind of slow, deliberate movement of someone deciding whether or not to answer. Then the door cracked open, revealing Karen's carefully composed face. She had the kind of expression that managed to look both condescending and pleasantly indifferent at the same time. Jake, she said, tilting her head slightly. What a surprise. His eyes flicked past her. Over her shoulder, inside the living room, was his firewood. Stacked neatly by the fireplace. His firewood. I want it back, he said, voice tight. Karen blinked, then let out a small laugh, stepping onto the porch as if addressing a wayward child. Oh, that's what this is about? She gestured vaguely toward the yard. Jake, it's just firewood. It's my firewood, he snapped. And you had no right to take it. Karen crossed her arms, sighing like she was already exhausted by the conversation. Jake, you know as well as I do that the HOA has emergency provisions in place for these situations. We redistribute resources as needed to ensure everyone is taken care of. His fists clenched. Asterisk everyone asterisk didn't get firewood, Karen. You did. Her expression didn't flicker. Well, some of us were more in need than others. She gestured toward her house, where the soft glow of the fireplace flickered invitingly. Besides, you can always buy more. Jake took a slow breath through his nose, forcing himself not to explode. That's not the point. You took something that wasn't yours and you didn't even ask. I didn't have to ask, she said smoothly. It was for the good of the neighborhood. His nails dug into his palms. You're unbelievable. Karen smiled, her lips curving in that slow, satisfied way that set his teeth on edge. If you're really struggling, I suppose I could allow you to use some of our firewood. Since, you know, we're all in this together. Jake's vision blurred with sheer frustration. He forced himself to step back, to turn away before he said something that would only make things worse. But as he walked away, he could feel her smirking at his back. He had tried reasoning with her. He had tried demanding what was his. And both had failed. That meant he needed a new plan. One that Karen wouldn't see coming. Jake sat by his nearly empty fireplace, the last few logs crackling as they burned low. The warmth barely reached him, but it wasn't the cold making his skin prickle, it was the slow simmer of anger refusing to die down. Karen had stolen from him, stood on her porch and smirked while justifying it, and there was nothing he could do about it. At least, not directly. Tom sat across from him, leaning back in the worn armchair, sipping a beer. He raised an eyebrow. "You look like a man plotting a murder." Jake exhaled sharply, rubbing his jaw. "Not murder." He paused. "Something close." Tom grinned. "That's the spirit." Jake leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "It's not just the firewood, man. It's the principle. She steals from me, calls it community effort, then tells me to buy more while she sits nice and cozy with my logs burning in her fireplace." Tom swirled his beer absent-mindedly. "And we both know the HOA won't do a damn thing about it." Jake nodded. "Which means it's up to me." Tom leaned forward, intrigued. "What are you thinking?" Jake ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. "I need a way to make her regret taking my firewood. Something she won't see coming." Tom smirked. "You're not thinking small, are you?" Jake's lips curled into a slow grin. "No. I'm thinking ants." Tom choked on his beer, coughing as he sat up. "I'm sorry, what?" "Ants," Jake repeated. "A whole lot of them." Tom wiped his mouth, eyes narrowing. "Explain." Jake stood, pacing as the idea formed into something sharper. "What if I replace my stolen wood with something a little less cozy? Something that looks exactly like firewood but is actually filled with hundreds of angry little surprises." Tom's eyes widened. "You're serious?" Jake nodded. "Dead serious." Tom let out a low whistle. "All right. I'm in." The next morning, Jake wasted no time. He drove to the edge of town where an old farmer sold seasoned logs by the truckload. He picked out a fresh batch, made sure they looked just like the ones Karen had stolen, and loaded them into his truck. On the way home, he took a detour down a dirt road leading to a spot he knew well, a place where fire ants thrived in thick, seething colonies beneath the dry earth. He parked, stepping out into the crisp air, and surveyed the ground. Sure enough, there were mounds dotting the landscape, each one a stronghold of tiny territorial warriors. Grabbing a pair of thick gloves, he got to work. Using a small saw, he carefully hollowed out a few of the logs, creating hidden chambers within them. Then, with the precision of a man on a mission, he collected handfuls of fire ants, coaxing them into their new wooden homes. The little demons scrambled inside, disappearing into the hollow spaces, their movements nearly imperceptible once the logs were sealed shut with a bit of glue and sawdust. Jake stood back, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cold air. He imagined Karen lounging by her fireplace, enjoying the stolen warmth, only to watch in horror as hundreds of furious ants erupted from the logs, swarming her pristine living room. It was perfect. By the time he got home, the neighborhood was already abuzz with talk of the upcoming temperature drop. Jake made sure to stack his new batch of firewood neatly by the shed, right where Karen's nosy spies could see it. He even made a show of carrying an armful toward his porch, muttering just loud enough for a passing neighbor to overhear, "Good thing I got a new load before the storm hits." By nightfall the trap was set. Jake didn't have to wait long. The next morning he peered out his window and sure enough the pile was smaller. A smirk tugged at his lips. He could practically picture it, Karen sending one of her lackeys to do her dirty work, hauling away the new logs, completely unaware of what they were carrying. Now all he had to do was wait. That night, the cold hit hard, the wind rattling against the windows. Jake sat by his empty fireplace, bundled in a hoodie, his anticipation keeping him warm. Any moment now, Karen would start her fire. Any moment now, she would realize the terrible mistake she had made. Then, just as he was about to take a sip of coffee, it happened. A scream. No, multiple screams. Jake shot up, moving to the window. Down the street, Karen's house was alive with movement. Figures darting past the windows, shadows flailing wildly against the walls. Then, through the chilly night air, came the unmistakable sound of chaos. A crash. A muffled shriek. The distant, panicked sound of Karen's voice. Jake's grin widened. The fun had begun. Jake leaned against the window frame, watching the chaos unfold. Even from a distance, he could see the flurry of movement inside Karen's house. Shadows jerked and flailed, furniture crashed against the hardwood, and a piercing shriek echoed into the cold night air. He sipped his coffee, savoring the moment. Then the front door burst open. Karen stumbled out first, her robe half-tied, her blonde bob in disarray. Her usual poise was gone, replaced with wild panic as she swatted at herself, smacking invisible, or very real, threats clinging to her skin. Behind her, her husband, Greg, followed in a similar state of distress, his slippers lost somewhere in the house, hopping on one foot as he clawed at his arms. Then came the others. A stream of guests, dressed far too formally for what was now a war zone, poured onto the porch. Jake squinted, surprised to recognize a few faces from the neighborhood. So it had been a party. A cozy, firelit gathering of HOA elites, sipping wine and congratulating themselves on their control over the community. Until the Firewood turned against them. A sharp laugh threatened to escape him, but he held it in, watching as Karen shrieked and shook her arms. Get them off. Get them off. Greg flailed uselessly beside her. Where are they even coming from? Then the final guest made his entrance, Mr. Delaney, the HOA treasurer. A man who took himself far too seriously, now reduced to a trembling mess as he bolted through the doorway, tripped over the porch step, and went sprawling onto the front lawn. A gasp rippled through the small crowd, but no one dared help him, not when they were all slapping at their own bodies, twisting and jumping like lunatics. Jake could barely contain himself. This was better than he had imagined. Karen turned, eyes wild, searching for someone, anyone, to blame. That's when she spotted him. For a split second, their gazes locked across the distance. Her chest heaved, her lips parted, but no words came out at first. Then, with a guttural growl of fury, she pointed a trembling finger at him. You. Jake lifted his coffee cup in a casual toast. Karen stormed forward, but Greg grabbed her arm. Karen, inside, we have to. I am not going back in there, she shrieked. From inside, another crash sounded. The unmistakable shattering of glass. Someone had panicked and knocked over a wine rack, or worse. Karen yanked her arm free, half running, half hopping across the lawn. Jake stepped out onto his porch, watching as she closed the distance, firelight from inside catching the fury on her face. You did this, she spat, her voice cracking. This infestation. Jake raised an eyebrow. Oh, you mean my firewood? Her jaw tightened, the realization hitting her like a slap. Oh, come on, Karen, he said, feigning innocence. You took my logs without asking. I assumed you wanted them. Her face turned an alarming shade of red. You put something in them. Jake shrugged. You mean fire ants? That's strange. I didn't see any when I stacked them by my shed. Guess you must have picked up a bad batch. Karen was shaking with rage, fists clenched, nostrils flaring. You're going to pay for this. Jake took a step forward, lowering his voice just enough for her to hear. Actually, Karen, you're going to pay for this. You admitted to taking my property. In writing. He held up the crumpled HOA letter sheet taped to his door. And unless you'd like to explain to the entire HOA how you broke into my yard and stole from me, I suggest you walk away. Karen opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Behind her, Greg was still twitching, his arms covered in angry red welts. The guests were huddled in small groups, their faces pale and horrified, their expensive clothes ruined from their desperate attempts to rid themselves of the ants. The humiliation was complete. Jake took another sip of coffee, savoring the silence. Karen's lips trembled. Her shoulders rose and fell in ragged breaths. But she knew. She knew she had no way out of this. Without another word, she spun on her heel and stormed back toward the house. Greg trailed behind her, grumbling under his breath. Jake smiled as the door slammed shut. Game. Set. Match. The aftermath of Karen's firewood fiasco rippled through the neighborhood like a well-thrown stone in a still pond. By morning, whispers of the ant invasion had spread like wildfire. Neighbors who had once feared Karen's wrath now exchanged amused glances over their mailboxes. The HOA elites, usually so composed, looked rattled as they hurried to their cars, itching at phantom bites. Jake, on the other hand, enjoyed his morning coffee on the porch, a newfound lightness in his chest. The bitter chill of the air didn't bother him. The satisfaction of poetic justice was warmth enough. Then, as expected, Karen came storming down the sidewalk. She was a mess. Dark circles under her eyes, her perfectly ironed clothes slightly disheveled, a stiffness in her shoulders that betrayed her barely contained rage. But something was different this time. She wasn't charging toward him with blind fury, she was calculating, restrained. Jake lowered his mug, watching her with mild curiosity. Karen stopped at the bottom of his porch steps, her lips curling into something that was supposed to resemble a smile but looked more like a pained grimace. Morning, Jake. That was new. Jake leaned back. Morning, Karen. Sleep well? Her jaw tensed. I assume you're enjoying yourself. He shrugged. Enjoying the fresh air. Nice, isn't it? Karen inhaled sharply, the muscles in her neck tightening before she forced herself to relax. Listen, she said, clasping her hands in front of her, voice painfully even. We've had our differences, but this has gone far enough. Jake tilted his head, amused. Has it? She bristled. I've spoken to the HOA board. They're not happy. No kidding. Her eyes darkened. And while we could turn this into a very ugly situation, I'm willing to be the bigger person here. We can put all this behind us if you agree to. No. Karen blinked. Excuse me? Jake took another sip of coffee, savoring the way her patience was beginning to crack. You're about to ask me to drop this, let you off the hook and pretend none of this ever happened. My answer is no. Karen's smile twitched. Jake, you don't want to start a war with me. Karen, he said, matching her tone, you already lost the war. Her nostrils flared. I can make your life miserable. You already tried. Didn't work. She took a step forward, lowering her voice. I have friends on the board, Jake. People who can make things happen. Jake smirked. You mean the same people who fled your house last night like it was on fire? The ones still shaking ants out of their jackets. He shook his head. I think your friends have bigger problems. Karen's fingers curled into fists, her mask slipping. For the first time, the power dynamic had shifted, and she felt it. She wasn't the queen of the HOA anymore. She was just another homeowner, standing on the porch of a man she had underestimated. Jake leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave me alone. No more stealing, no more harassment, no more stupid HOA violations taped to my door. He took another sip of coffee, letting the moment stretch. Because if you don't, I'll make sure the next lesson is even less pleasant. Karen swallowed, eyes darting to the side as if searching for a way out. She wasn't used to being backed into a corner. Finally, with a sharp exhale, she turned on her heel and marched away, her heels clicking against the pavement. Jake watched her go, feeling lighter than he had in months. By noon, a new HOA letter appeared on his door. But this time it wasn't a violation. It was an official statement. Karen has voluntarily stepped down as HOA president, effective immediately. Jake grinned. Victory had never tasted so sweet.